Welcome to the Third Win channel, where today we'll be looking at Season 3 of Drake and Josh by making an episodes tier list. And we've done one of these for Season 1 and 2, so you can check those out first if you haven't already. And otherwise, we've also made one for Zoey 101, all 4 seasons, and we've made them for iCarly seasons. So you can go check those out if you're interested or if you like those shows. But without further ado, let's get into this video. So here's our tier list, ABC, blah blah blah. But here are tiers more specifically: favorites or iconic series on the top, or episodes. I mean, great episodes, good episodes, okay episodes, and could skip episodes. And without further ado, let's get into the tier list itself. But the way I'm going to do it is we're going to start at the bottom and we'll go to the top. So we're going to start with the could skip okay episodes, and we're going to keep going from there up to the top. So first up, we have Dr. Phil's show, the 17th and last episode of the season. I'm going to tell you right away, we don't have any could skip episodes, but this one will go in okay and at the very bottom of okay. And if you've forgotten, this episode is one where Drake and Josh kind of bicker as they usually do, and it starts to get on, I think it's Megan's nerve because she can't sleep, or was it? I think that's what it is. And then they get called into this Dr. Phil's show, but it turns out that Drake has dated Dr. Phyllis's daughter before, and it all kind of doesn't really work out how the guys want, because she keeps up bringing like the bad things that have happened, and there are some physical fights because of the whole girlfriend thing. So the guys end up kind of reconciling and understanding that all the good times they've had outweigh the bad times. But the episode, of course, ends with them getting into an argument and Megan throwing a smoke bomb in the room. So that's funny, but for me, I think this is the worst episode of the season. That being said, I do love all the episodes, and I'm trying to be as critical as possible about these episodes, but if I had to choose one at the bottom, it has to be this one. Next up, we have Helen's Surgery, the 7th episode of the season. This one, to me, is just, it's not memorable enough, and when I'm watching it, I feel like it's a little bit boring. An episode centered around Helen is, in theory is cool, but I think that episodes, I forgot what it's called, but the one where there's a thunderstorm and Helen's there and there's a lot of Helen there, I think that one's just a lot more exciting. This one, it showcases Helen in a good way, but it's just a little boring for me. What can I really say about this episode? I mean, if you don't remember it, it's where Drake throws kind of like a secret party in Helen's house, and then because he thinks she's blind and blah blah blah, but then she turns out she's fine and she can take them off and she can see, and then she thinks it's a party for her. So things end up working out, and Megan actually gets to pitch an idea to Helen, which she ends up making, what was it, $700 on. So that's what happens here. I don't think it's a super exciting episode, and it goes in okay, right next to Dr. Phil's show. Next up, we got Playing the Field, episode 6. So for the same reasons as the last one, when I think of this episode, I don't find it very memorable. I think actually the most exciting thing about this episode, as you see in the picture, is Josh's mustache. I think it's really funny how everyone wants to get him to quit the mustache, but then he has like people coming up to him saying, "Hey, it's kind of like a bro thing, like, oh, cool mustache, bro." And then Mindy ends up paying Megan $30 to shave it off at night, so that's sad. But otherwise, we have some Drake girl stuff. Drake doesn't want to lose his girlfriend, wants to win her back, kind of impress her, but I'm not really going to talk about that. I think this episode's just a little unmemorable. So I'm going to put this one in okay. Let's move on. We have, I think, 2 more episodes in the okay section. As you can see, you can kind of see the graphic going over from right to left in order. So we're ordering them from left to right in each column, or in each row, I mean. So let's move on. We got Sheep Thrills, fun play on words, and this episode is fun. It doesn't have much going for it, and that's why it's a little low, but I think it's funny. The whole Megan gets a sheep, puts the responsibility on the guys. The guys get in trouble getting caught with the sheep, and they get grounded for a month. But they do have the arrangement where Megan doesn't prank them for 3 months, which is nice, of course. But then after their month of being grounded ends, they see that there's a zebra in the garage, and Megan looks at them again, and they're just not having it. They don't want to get involved whatsoever. We don't get to know what happens with the zebra, but I think that was funny, and that alone to me. And also, of course, I love the name Bab. I think that's really funny as well. So yeah, this episode goes in okay, but we're trending towards some better episodes in the season. Definitely not the worst. And lastly, we have Megan's new teacher. I think this episode actually quite entertaining. The only reason I really have this a little lower is that I think it's a little slightly poorly written in terms of like the outcomes of the episode and uh what we get out of it. Josh is an aspiring teacher. He's in this program called the TTT, which is like the Teachers of Tomorrow, I think it's called. And he starts teaching Megan's class. What a coincidence. And he is way too strict. He flunks the whole class on stuff that is way too advanced. So obviously that'll make them angry. So Megan becomes the most hated class because she's Josh's sister. And otherwise, a kid in Megan's class also gains the attention of Drake because he needs a new drummer, and this kid happens to be really good, but he's not able to drum for him because he flunks that test that Josh gave them, or pop quiz. So everyone's mad at Josh, and Megan and Drake stage a plan to get Josh out of the job, which is successful. And I guess Josh is sad about that, but everything works out for Megan because she gets reinvited to the birthday party she wasn't invited to, and Drake gets the drummer for the gig they have. And it actually ends up good for Josh as well because everyone admits that because of Josh, their old teacher got fired. I can't remember exactly why, but everyone ends up happy. I just think that the writing is a little weird here, but it's a good episode, really entertaining. So that was our last okay episode. We're moving into the good stuff now, the good episodes. And leading that, first we have Girl Power. So it's an entertaining episode, and I was tempted to put it in okay, but I think there's some important and interesting dynamics in this one. This is the one where a girl thinks she's stronger than Drake, and they have a fight in Josh's bedroom, or Drake and Josh's bedroom, and they have that fight in their bedroom to prove who's stronger because Josh is having Mindy's parents over to prove that he's a good boyfriend and that he's worth it. And it all ends up, of course, in a mess because Drake and remember the girl's name, but they tumble down the stairs when fighting, and Josh is mad, and he kind of explains to Drake that this is important to him, and the parents see that he really was worried about this and he really cared about this, kind of showing Mindy's parents that he cared. So Mindy's parents approve of Josh, which is nice, and it ends in a fairly silly manner where I think Mindy's parents kind of have the whole girl versus boy thing too, so the fight continues, and it's exciting. But yeah, I think bottom of good is exactly where this episode belongs. And let's move on to the first episode of the season, the Drake and Josh in. This episode has a lot of funny moments. I think a lot of moments that just make you laugh. Like, for example, I should explain a little bit about the episode. Drake and Josh's parents are out for, I think it's like weekend, and or on vacation, and they give Drake and Josh $200, which of course Drake spends immediately, but it was actually meant to be like, for supplies, for emergencies, and they have to make this money back. And Drake and Josh get the idea of um, inviting just random people to stay at their house. It's a bed and breakfast basically, and it goes very wrong when Drake brings in a bunch of teenagers to make money from, and then these are kind of like hip teenagers or people in their 20s, and the MTV TV something happens, a big event, and everything goes crazy when even Drake and Josh's parents see the show happening on TV, and everything becomes a panic, and they know they're coming home, and basically it's the classic like, oh, push everyone out of the house, gotta clean everything up before the parents come, and everything works out for Drake, Josh, and Megan, except at the end of the episode, Drake and Josh's parents get arrested for having a illegal televised event at their house, which is really funny. We don't really get a resolution to that, but I think it's quite funny. Maybe it doesn't make much sense, but yeah, it's an entertaining episode, trending towards like the lower good, I think, is exactly where I'd put it. And following up on that, we're getting into the good stuff, is We're Married, question mark, I think. And that's the third episode of the season. And this is one that kind of like, a lot of the episodes that trend higher on this tier list are ones that like are really memorable to me and like stick in my brain. And this is definitely one of them. This is one that's really out there. And it involves Josh's pen pal from Eudonia called Yuka, and basically, Drake and Yuka start hanging out more than Josh and Yuka. So Drake kind of likes Yuka, and Yuka kind of likes Drake, and while Josh is kind of like trying to make Yuka like him more. Basically, he overhears a conversation Yuka's having with her parents, where she mentions that she's homesick, but they actually they confuse the translation homesick for sick of home. And what happens is they host a ceremony, Eudonian ceremony at home. By the way, Eudonia is a made up country for those that don't know. Everyone knows that. Uh, but the ceremony ends up being a marriage ceremony, and Drake is actually marrying Yuka, and that's tragic, of course, because Josh is wanted to be kind of girlfriend boyfriend with Yuka, and it all ends with Yuka's parents coming to town, and they stage a way to break up the marriage. So they feed Yuka's parents goat, which is sacred in Eudonia, and it ends with everything working out, except they find out that Drake at least finds out that Yuka's parents are, or at least her dad is a billionaire, and he regrets everything and wants to be with Yuka, for monetary reasons. And yeah, the episode ends up with, I think, pretty much all parties pretty sad, especially Drake. So yeah, I thought this episode was very memorable, quite good as well. I really enjoy this one, and yeah, let's get into our last good episode of the season, which is Paging Dr. Drake, and this is one where the very first sequence of this episode is so funny. It's Josh is lifting weights, which is actually really cool, because Josh in real life was trying to lose a lot of weight, and you can kind of see through season 1 to season 4 that Josh loses a lot of weight. So maybe that's a reference to that. But Josh is lifting weights, really heavy ones, and Drake shoots Josh with a potato shooter while Josh is lifting this huge weight, and it drops on his foot. And Josh tries to hide it, but he can't, and he ends up needing surgery. And Drake tags along, and he finds some really attractive nurses, and he poses as a doctor to gain their attention. But this all goes sideways because Drake starts impersonating this doctor, and a different doctor walks in and confuses him for, I think the doctor is called Dr. Nosebomb or something, which is a really famous young surgeon. And Drake gets involved in doing actual surgery, and he somehow needs to get out of it. And of course, posing as a doctor is completely illegal. And it all ends up with him jumping out the window when the real Nosebomb comes in, and he breaks his arm. And I think Josh ends up okay. And of course, Drake's earned a lesson. And yeah, I think this episode's really fun. It's very memorable to me in my head, and I quite like it. I think it was a lot of fun, and especially that opening sequence is hilarious. Now let's move into our great episodes, and we have a lot of them in this season. Starting off with episode 5, The Affair. I was tempted to put, there's a few here in this great category which I think probably deserve to be iconic, but since I have some favorites in the season, I think what I'm trying to say is I think The Affair could be an iconic episode. But this one where the boys kind of suspect Walter or their dad of cheating, and this whole kind of thing persists the episode, spying, figuring out what's going on, and in the end they find him with this woman at dinner, and they're like, okay, everything is confirmed, and they end up what's it called humiliating Walter by making the woman put food on herself, or they put food in her, and Walter comes back and explains the situation. He's getting a job as a national weatherman for Good Morning America, which is obviously a huge job opportunity, but that doesn't work out. And Walter tells the boys to put food on themselves. I think it's a really good episode. There's just the dynamic of kind of a Walter-centric episode I think works out better than, for example, Helen one. And Walter's one of my favorite characters, so I really enjoy this episode. Definitely great. Next, let's move on to Little Sibling, which is, I know, a fan favorite. I did some looking around to see what people like in this season, and Little Sibling seems to be one that people really like, and I actually really agree. I think this episode is great. And let me explain why. So, Sammy is involved in this episode, which is this kid you see on the right, and he comes about because Drake ends up doing something very bad. And Miss Hafer, where he gets in trouble in school, and Miss Hafer agrees to not make him go to detention or Sunday school, I think it's called, if he becomes Sammy's little sibling, or if he lets Sammy be his little sibling. Basically, kind of, I don't know what it's called, but when you kind of become a model to a younger kid and kind of help him out. But Sammy ends up liking Josh way more. They have more in common. Josh is just better to Sammy. So that's the problem. So Drake, with expensive stuff and different fun things, tries to get Sammy to like him more. And it works in the end. And Josh is actually really sad about it because Josh mentions that, people always choose Drake over him. So it's really cool to have someone who actually appreciates him. And Drake realizes that he's done something wrong. And he pretends he's sick so that Josh can go with Sammy to a show they had arranged, like a magic show. And Drake has to go to Sunday school, but Josh realizes this and gets him out of Sunday school, which is a heartwarming moment on many different levels. I think this episode is great written episode, and I really enjoy it. So definitely a great episode. Next, we have Mindy's Bank, which is a big kind of character episode, which I, as the people who view this channel a lot know, I love these kinds of episodes with focus on the characters. And after the season 2 finale called Honors Council, we find out that Mindy's back from a mental hospital thing. I don't know the details, but yeah, she's back, and she beats Josh again in the science fair. And in the process, Josh and Mindy learn that they have feelings for each other, but it's all stinted because Josh, or I think Mindy actually breaks up with Josh because she knows how much Drake hates him, and it just wouldn't work out. But when Drake finds out about this, he's like, no, we got to get you two together. You guys are meant to be together. And Drake helps Josh up to Mindy's window, and they work it out and kiss, and it's a beautiful moment. And this episode is definitely great. Next up, we're getting into the tops. I think we're down to 5 last episodes here. We got Foam Finger, the 9th episode of the season. This one again, I think it's pretty iconic. I probably should have put it in iconic, but it's at the top 5, and top 5 in any Drake and Josh season is a big deal because I love this show. So Foam Finger is about the foam finger incident that happens 8 years before that both boys remember, but what they didn't know is that it was, two boys ended up in a fight 8 years ago, but they didn't know it was Josh and Drake. Like, they thought it was some random kid. And they realize, oh my god, we fought against each other. And this spews out in a huge argument because they both cared about this foam finger, but Drake ended up getting it. And it all ends up, rumbling down into them getting the guy who was actually selling the foam fingers to settle their argument about what happened. And what ended up happening at the night, as Lenny, the guy who was selling you see him in the picture, what ended up happening that day was that Megan threw a cookie at I think it was Josh, and that was what started the fight. So even when they were super young, Megan was the one starting the fights, which I think is amazing. I think it's really funny and definitely a great episode. Next, we have The Theater Thug, episode 14. So this episode, I saw a lot of people throwing serious hate on it. I don't think the fans like this episode at all, but to me, this is one of the most memorable episodes in season 3. I love this episode. I think it's like, I don't know, the writing just feels so appropriate for the show. And that what happens is that Drake and Josh get this opportunity to work or star in an America's Most Wanted or FBI's Most Wanted criminals episode in Drake and Josh. And Josh gets to star as a theater thug, which is like a famous criminal in the area, and Drake gets to say a couple lines. And what ends up happening is that Drake becomes a celebrity for saying those like 3 lines, whereas Josh, every time the police gets called on him, people beat him up because they think he's the real theater thug, and it's just a disaster for Josh. And at the end of the episode, where they actually catch the real theater thug, because Josh works at the theater, and they call the police and everything, the police go for Josh. He gets arrested while the theater thug gets away, which is really funny, I think. I know it doesn't make much sense, and it could be annoying that he keeps getting, punished for being the actor, but I think it's really funny. Next, we are moving into our favorites or iconics, and these are my 3 favorites from this season, absolute favorites, and those are number 3, Peruvian Puff Pepper. I think this episode is super entertaining and super fun, and there's so much dynamic between Drake and Josh, and Drake and Josh and Megan, and we get to find out about Megan's room and having the secret panel and the electronics and how she manages to trick the brothers so much. And well, what this episode is about a salsa competition, and Drake and Josh are really confident they're gonna win. They're working hard to win it because you win a TV if you win, and Megan is like, "Hey, I can help," and they're like, "No, no, no, no. We want the TV for ourselves." So of course Megan joins the competition herself and plans this whole scheme to get Drake and Josh disqualified by, while they're listening, she knows that they're listening. She mentions the Peruvian puff pepper and how it's illegal. No, not how it's illegal, but she mentions how it's instantly going to win the tournament. So the boys are like, "Hey, let's steal the Peruvian puff pepper," and they do. And I think they do end up winning the competition, but the Peruvian puff pepper is illegal, and Megan gets through her second place, wins the competition. It's kind of unclear whether Megan planned the Peruvian puff pepper thing being illegal or not, but you kind of have to see the episode. It's a little complicated, but it's really good, honestly. I think this episode's really fun, and I love how their salsa explodes in the kitchen and it goes everywhere, and Megan's a culprit, and the boys get punished for it, of course. At the end of the episode, they're painting the kitchen walls. It's funny. Yeah, but favorites iconic for sure. And we're moving into our top 2 here, and these are 2 of my favorite episodes of Drake and Josh ever. I think the number 1 is my favorite episode of Drake and Josh ever. But first we got Alien Invasion, which is episode 16. They actually come right, the last 2 here come one after another, 15, 16. But Alien Invasion is a really cool one. I don't know why, but we get to see like some scenes in their backyard, which I think is cool. But Megan basically buys this new telescope, and the boys place a prank on her by going into her software and putting a little alien ship in the telescope software. And Megan gets scared, and they start pulling pranks about aliens being real. And then they dress as aliens and scare Megan. But what ends up happening is that one of Megan's friends comes as the real alien and scares the boys. I don't know if that's planned by Megan or if the friend just helped Megan, but I think it's really funny how maybe initially they did prank Megan, but she catches on to it and pranks the boys. I think it's really funny, and it's a really fun episode, and it just has a good vibe. So that's one of my favorites of the season, and my absolute favorite of the season, episode number 15, The Demonator. I can't begin to explain how much I like this episode. I don't really have an amazing explanation for it. Actually, I just kind of contradict myself there. Huh? I love this episode. I don't have an amazing reason, but I can kind of break it down. The boys want to go on this crazy ride that is coming to town, and they can't because they have to babysit Grandpa Nichols. And they, of course, ignore their parents about this, and they go with Megan to the ride anyway. And they they kind of bribe or get Craig and Eric to watch Grandpa Nichols, and Grandpa Nichols is completely knocked out from a surgery or anesthetic or something. And yeah, they get to go to the Demonator, but they keep getting set back in line, which is creating a tighter time frame for them to get back home before their parents get home. And all that is funny. Them waiting in line is amazing. But what's going on at home with Craig and Eric, Grandpa Nichols wakes up. He thinks he's in World War II, and he thinks Craig and Eric are German spies, and them chasing him around, and Grandpa Nichols going, "USA, USA, USA." It's too funny. I love it so much. It's the moment I remember the most from Drake and Josh, and I just love this episode. And remember, this is my opinion. You guys can argue all you want, but this is my favorite. And here's your final tier list. This is how I'd rank. This is how I'd put the episodes, and I hope you enjoyed me talking about them, and I'd like to hear what you guys thought of this season as well as the episodes. How would you rank them? Let me know. And yeah, that's been this episode, and you can go check out our other Nickelodeon content. We make loads of it. We're also reviewing the new iCarly revival series, so you can go check that out if you'd like. But I appreciate you all. Thank you for watching. This has been the Third Wind channel, and I'll see you guys with the season 4 episode tier list coming soon, Drake and Josh. But for now, That's all for me, and I'll see you guys soon.